عجايب يا رسول الله وغرايب يا أبو العترة، حسن قبره بحماك شلون ترضى ينهدم قبره، هلا ترضى ينهدم قبره. مسموم راح مظلوم راح الحسن صيح مسموم مظلوم بحياتك يا رسول الله، سند للكون وجدانك، ومن أشر عليك الموت بيدودي فانجث معنك، ضريحك صار لي المطرود، هلا مفزع والكرم شانك، يا القبرك يزيل الهم والوافد إلك يسلم، غوالي بدهره ما يشتم، إذا يقصد إلك معلول يشم من تربيتك يبرى. مسموم راحل مظلوم صيح مظلوم، مسموم وجودك رحمة الباري، ضريحك مفزاع المختار، أبد لا والله ما ترضى ولا تقبلها يا المختار، حبيبك ينهدم قبره يا الله، حبيبك ينهدم قبره ويطول معويلي الأشرار، حياة هضام ويتعذب، صليل السم قامر يلهب، بمماته كابدي الأصعاب، حياته وموتته مصابين، وجنابك سيدي أدرى. مسموم صيح راح الحسن مظلوم هلا مسموم حاضر مظلوم إلى الشاعر الأديب الأستاذ جابر الكاظمي، حسن سبطك يا أبو إبراهيم تجرع بالحياة هموم، عام صعب وشد منها يوم يمر أشد من يوم، عقب القهر لنشب لك على فراش الأجل مسموم، هذا الحسن يا جد قضى ومات بغدر جعده، قضى ومات بغدر جعده، لهيب السم فطار كبده، خسف بدري سيم الحاله، عليه ينكس باتي الحرة. مسموم مظلوم هلا بالنشامة، مسموم حاضر مظلوم الحسن سبطك يا ابو ابراهيم تجرع بالحياة هموم، عام صعب وشد من يوم يمر أشد من يوم العقب القهر لنشبلك على فراش أجل مسموم. هذا الحسن يا جده قضى ومات بغدر جعده لهيب السم وطار كبده خسف بدري سيما الحاله عليه ينكس فات الحره مسموم مظلوم مظلوم قواك الله هلا هلا مسموم مسموم مظلوم مظلوم. الحسن نحب القيضة وثاني مصيبة ساعة الشيعة هلا يا مقبري يا ابو ابراهيم إلى من رادوا يدفنوه لواصف ما يعاونه نبيل صار ناعش يرموه ردت ترمي حدوانه سهامي ومزقته جفانه لو ان ما صبر خوانه كان الدم يصير مواد ودينك ينتهي أمره مسموم على مظلوم مسموم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم. إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم 2 فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون. وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون. وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون. أتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردن الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون. إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين. إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون. قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين. وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين. إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون. يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون. ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون. وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون. وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون. وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون. سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون. وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون. والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير عزيز العليم. والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم. لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون. وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون. وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين. وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون. وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين. وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين. ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين. ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون. ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون. قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون. إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون. فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملته أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون صدق الله العلي العظيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء ووضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء، وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء، وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء، وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء، وبأسمائك التي ملت أركان كل شيء، وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء، وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس، يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك العصام، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقم، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء، اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك واستشفع بك إلى نفسك، وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك، وأن توزعني شكرك، وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع، أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا، وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وانزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته، وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك، وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك، ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا، ولا لقبائه ساترا، ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي، وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترت، وكم من فاد من البلاء قلت، وكم من عثار وقيت، وكم من مكروه دفعت، وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرت. اللهم عظم بلائي وافرط بي سوء حالي، وقصرت بي أعمالي، وقدت بي أغلالي، وحبسني عن نفعي بود آمالي، وخدتني الدنيا بغرورها، ونفسي بجنايتها ومطالي. يا سيدي فاسألك بعزتك لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي، ولا تفزعني بخفي ما اطلعت علي من سري، ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي. وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي، وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا، وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي، من لي غيرك أسأل كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي، أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي، ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي، فغرني بما أهوى واسأله على ذلك القضاء، فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودك، وخالفت بعض أوامرك، فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك، ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك، وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي، معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا، لا أجد مفر مما كان مني، ولا مفزع أتوجه إليه في أمر غير قبولك عذري، وإدخالك إياي في سعة من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري، وارحم شدة ضري، وفكني من شدي وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي، يا من بدا خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي، هب لي الابتداء كرمك وسالف برك بي يا إلهي وسيدي وربي. أتراك معذب بنارك بعد توحيدك، وبعد من طوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك، ولهج به لساني من ذكرك، واعتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضي من ربيت، أو تبعد من أدنيت، أو تشرد من آويت، أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمت. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي، أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدا، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقا وبشكرك مادحا، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققا، وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارها سعة الأوطان تعبدك طائعة، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة ما هكذا الظن بك، ولا أخبرنا بفضلك أنك يا كريم. يا ربي وأنت تعلم ضعفي القليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها، وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه، قليل مكثور يسير بقاء قصير مدة، فكيف احتمال البلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما منها ضج وأبكي، لأليم العذاب وشدتي أم لطول البلاء ومدتي. فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي. صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك، وهبني يا إلهي. صبرت على هر نارك فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك، أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك. فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناطقا لأضجن إليك بين أهلي ضجيج العاملين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولو نادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفتك، وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته، وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته، وهو يضج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل التوحيد، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك، أم كيف تؤلم النار وهو يعمل فضلك ورحمتك، أم كيف يهلكه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوتا وترى مكانا، أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفا، أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقا، أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رب، أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها هيهات. ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك، ولا مشبه لما عملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك، فباليقين يقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاهدك، وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك. لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مقر ولا مقاما لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين وأنت جل ثناؤك كنت مبتدعا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون إلهي وسيدي فاسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من علي أجريتها أن تهمني في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمت وكل ذنب أذنبت وكل قبيح أسررت وكل جهل عملت كتمته وأعلنت أخفيت وأظهرت وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلت أو إحسان فضلت أو بر نشرت أو رزق بسطت أو ذنب تغفر أو خطأ تستر يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي يا من بيدي ناصيتي يا عليما بذري ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وأعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورا وبخدمتك موصولة وأعمالي عندك مكمولة حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي يا من علي معولي يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب قوي على خدمتك جواره واشدد على العظيمة جوانه وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك حتى أسرع إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في البارزين واشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين وأخافك مخافة المؤمنين واجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فاعرض ومن كادني فكيد واجعل لي من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك وأقرب منزلة من وخصم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك، وجد لي بجودك، واعطف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، وجل لساني بذكرك لهجاء، وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك، وأقل لي أثرتي، واغفر زلتي، فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك، وأمرتهم بدعائك، وضمنت لهم الإجابة، فإليك يا ربي نسبت وجهي، وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي، وبلغني منايا، ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي، يا سريع الرضا، اكفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء، فإنك فعال لما تشاء، يا من اسمه دواء، وذكره شفاء، وطاعته غنى، ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء، وسلاه البكاء، يا سابغ النعام، يا دافع النقام، يا نور المستوحشين في الظلم، يا عالما لا يعلم، صل على محمد وآل محمد، وافعل بما أنت أهله، وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من أهله، وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا، برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. ارحمنا وصل اللهم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآل الطاهرين.
حياتنا يا حسين، مماتنا يا حسين، عزاؤنا يا حسين، لم نكن نبكي على طفل رضيع، بل طفولات مدى الدنيا.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، خاتم النبيين، شفيع المذنبين، رحمة للعالمين، مولانا وسيدنا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين، لا سيما بقية الله في الأرض، أرواحنا له الفداء، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الإمام الحسن العسكري عليه السلام: فأما من كان من الفقهاء صائنا لنفسه، حافظا لدينه، مخالفا لهواه، مطيعا لأمر مولاه، فللعوام أن يقلدوه. Respected elders, brothers, sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's a feature of every single generation that they always think that their time is the worst. If you think about our parents' generation, how many times do you remember your parents or your elders or your grandparents saying things like, "This time is very bad. It wasn't like this in our time"? How many times have you heard them reflect like this and say things like, "We accepted in our time, but the next generation will not accept"? Or, "We didn't ask this many questions, but this new generation asks many questions"? We've heard this time and time again from every single generation, and every generation thinks that their generation, the time is the worst. But yet, you see, generation after generation, the mazhab of Ahlul Bayt has survived. People are still within this mazhab. This mazhab still has its grounding and its position in this world. You see that there are mu'mineen, there are pious people, there are people who enact the teachings of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Right now, someone of my age will say things like, yes, I'm worried about my son, I'm worried about my daughter, I'm worried about my children. Are they going to be on the straight path or not? So every single generation goes through this, but Allah has shown one way or the other, the mazhab will stay alive. Now the challenge is that will we stay within the mazhab? Will we be able to follow the teachings of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam? Will our children and our future generation, will they be able to hang on to these things? And this is where the fear comes from. And this fear is something which is real, so it's a genuine concern, and it comes from our hearts, our feelings, our emotions, our sincerity. We are sincerely and genuinely concerned about the next generation. Especially when you see left, right and center, every Tom, Dick and Harry, whoever has an iPhone or an iPad, is able to record themselves, upload it onto YouTube, give it a name, give it a title, market it in such a way that people watch it, it goes viral, it goes throughout the globe. All of a sudden you hear, oh, you know, he has followers here, he has followers there, people are following him, people are listening to him, people are becoming misguided due to this person. I won't mention any names, but because it's not my style, but you know, these things are happening all the time, and I'm sure you understand what I'm trying to say and who I'm pointing towards. So, you know, we get very worried, we get very stressed out. The mazhab will continue no matter what. The question is, will we be in this mazhab? Will our children be in this mazhab? Or will they be slightly diverted, misguided and going to other places? This is going to be the thrust of my lecture today. It's going to be looking at this key concept and how and what does Islam do, did the Imams do, specifically Imam Hassan al-Askari do to address this? What does the Quran say about this? How do we react to this? What are the answers that we are looking for? Where do we get the answers? Are we equipped with the knowledge to answer these things? So we always think that our generation is the worst. The first thing that we have to look at is the Holy Quran, our immaculate, perfect, unadulterated book of guidance which Allah has given us. What does He say? He says, وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. This is one of the first principles that we have to bear in mind when we get these kinds of feelings of anxiety and fear and worrying about our children and what's going to happen to them. The Quran says, this is Surah number 65, verses 2 and 3. وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. Whoever has piety and God consciousness, Allah will find for him a way out. Allah will save him. Allah will deal with him so that he is successful. وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ. And will provide for him from where he has not even reckoned, when he didn't even think that money or income or some kind of sustenance, it doesn't have to be material income, it doesn't have to be money, but some kind of sustenance. How did it come? I don't know. Where did it come from? I don't know. How have I got barakat? I don't know, but I have got this barakah in my life. So what is the first step? Quran says taqwa, piety, God consciousness. This is one of the best ways to fortify yourself from these things. You see, fires will always happen. Fires will always happen. There'll always be a fire to put out. It was in our fathers' generations and our grandfathers' generations, and before that as well. It was during the time of the Imams, for God's sake. If we think things are bad, let me explain a few things from the life of the 11th Imam. If we think things are bad, imagine what they went through, and when we read some of the things that I want to present today, inshallah we'll see how the Imams had a very difficult time and a very difficult life. So the fires will always be there, in every generation, in every time. The question we have to ask ourselves is, if the fires are there, are we fireproof? We need to fireproof ourselves. We need to have that unshakable conviction and faith. We need to take that faith, give it to our children. Make them also unshakable. In fact, make them more unshakable and more fireproof than us. Because as we understand, generation after generation, things are getting worse. So, وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. We have to fireproof ourselves because fires are always going to break out. Wherever you look, every generation has to be putting out fires. وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. And whoever has faith and trust in Allah, فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. Allah will be enough. You don't need anything else. You don't need anything else because Allah fulfills all the requirements that you need with the condition of وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهِ. Whoever has taqwa. إِنَّ اللَّهَ بَالِغُ أَمْرِهِ قَدْ جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدْرًا. Allah will always see through His matters and His affairs. Another verse of the Quran is also, when I read this second verse that I'm going to recite to you now, it gives me goosebumps. It really puts me in a very careful position, in a very cautious position. Because Quran says the following, Surah number 6, verse number 116, وَإِن تُطِعْ أَكْثَرَ مَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ يُضِلُّوكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Quran says that if you obey most of the people on the earth, if you obey most of the people on the earth, they will lead you astray from the way of Allah. In other words, most people are misguided. Most people, you have to be very careful who you choose as your guides, your leaders, your influencers, the people you turn to. You have to be very careful because most of them will lead you astray. There are a few, there are a select few, there are a special few, may God bless them, who know the right from wrong, who can guide you to the right, dissuade you from the wrong, who you should attach yourselves to. إِن يَتَّبِعُونَ. Now what about these most people? Why are they misguided and why do they misguide other people? Because the same verse says, إِن يَتَّبِعُونَ إِلَّا الظَّنَّ. They don't really follow anything solid. They don't really follow anything which is concrete. They follow nothing but conjecture. They put a few things together. They read a few books. They look at a few things. They put their ideas and basically they come up with the wrong conclusion because they haven't got a grounding. They haven't got a foundation. They're not strong. They're not the giant scholars that we need. They are here today, they are gone tomorrow. If today it's one person in India, tomorrow it'll be another person somewhere else, and the next time it'll be another person somewhere else. And these things will only, from my point of view, will only increase. These are not going to decrease, these are going to increase. So the answer is, yes, we fight the fire, we put the fire out. But when you are surrounded by fires, what are you going to do? You're going to make yourself fireproof. So they don't follow anything but conjecture. وَإِنْهُمْ إِلَّا يَخْرُصُونَ. And they do nothing but surmise. This is guesswork. This is not anything solid. Anyway, let's have a look at a few incidents from the life of our beloved 11th Imam, whose shahadat we are commemorating. Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam. His most famous title is of course Askari. I often used to think, when we go to Kadhmain, there are two Imams buried there. And when we go to Samarra, there are two Imams buried there. In Kadhmain, there is the 7th Imam, Imam Musa al-Kadhim, and the 9th Imam, Imam Muhammad Taqi. They are known as Kadhmain, the two Kazims. Okay? Kadhmain. But when we go to Samarra, they are known as Askariyain, the two Askaris. Kadhmain I can understand because, out of respect and out of reverence for the older Imam, the first Imam of the two, the 7th Imam, the 9th Imam is also called Kazim. So the earlier Imam's title, out of respect and reverence for him, is applied to both. That is quite understandable. But why Askariyain? Why here we don't find that? Why aren't they called Naqiyain or Hadiyain, the two Hadis, the two Naqis? Why is it not named after the 10th Imam? This is a very simple answer to this, because basically both Imam Ali al-Naqi and Imam Hasan Askari were both stationed in Samarra, which was an askar. Askar in Arabic means a garrison, a place where the army stays, an army camp, encampment. So Imam Naqi alayhi salam was also called Askari. His title was also Askari, but it wasn't that famous for him. But this is why they are both called Askariyain, because actually this title applies to both of them. Now, when Imam Naqi alayhi salam was summoned to the capital of the time, which was Samarra, Imam Hasan al-Askari was only 2 years old. And they were under surveillance and they were accommodated in the garrison, in the army encampment. Why? Simply because the ruler of the time wanted to watch them very closely, and possibly also to intimidate them. When you're surrounded by a huge army, of course you're going to be intimidated. So Askar means garrison, and it was a little outside the town of Samarra, and hence in historical reports we find a mention of things like this. I went to the Askar, to the garrison, to meet the Imam. People have said this. The Imam's followers would often say, we find this in reports, I went to the Askar to meet the Imam. So the Imam was situated in that garrison area. Now, the Imam did not have an easy time. We think our time is bad. We think we are under pressure. We think we are being challenged a lot. Look at Imam's time. Imam was very young. And it was a very sizable community that he was overseeing. The Shias of the time, the Mu'mineen of the time, were quite high in number, and they were very widespread. But because of the pressures, Imam was under pressure, the Shias were under pressure, a lot of effort was being made by the rulers to keep them under pressure, to prevent the birth of the 12th Imam. They were aware of this, they knew the ahadith of the Holy Prophet, that there will be 12 successors after me. They said, this is the 11th one. The 12th one is going to come and he's going to change the whole world. He's going to reset the whole world. He's going to restore order. He's going to restore justice. We are the unjust ones, so our position is under threat. So they tried everything in their power to prevent the birth of the 12th Imam. So the Shias were forced to go underground, secretive. And it was like a connected web of people. People were somehow connected. Now this is fascinating when you look at history, that how did they function in this time? How did they manage to do what they did and actually be a living, growing, flourishing community, yet at the same time secretive and underground? Well, this is all the mastermind of our Imams. Because our Imams did things secretively and underground, but yet allowed the Shias to carry out their faith. So when the 11th Imam was made shaheed, and when he was martyred and he was killed and he left this world, he had a brother. Now this brother is famous in history. His nature was extremely destructive. He was an imposter. He tried to put himself in the Imam's position. So he was saying to people, you know what, my brother has died. Now I'm your Imam. And he tried his best in different ways to promote himself. Now one of the ways he did this is that he came to the Caliph's advisor. The Caliph had an advisor called Abdullah ibn Khaqan. He said to him, he said, give me the position of my brother. Now listen very carefully. This has a lot of lessons for us. Give me the position of my brother. The first thing we ask is, what do you mean, give me the position of my brother? Who is the Caliph to give you the position? Even the brother of the 11th Imam at that time, unfortunately, had this kind of belief. He believed that popularity and recognition of the ruler and different things like that would give him that elevation to the position of the Imam. So he says to him, give me the position of my brother. If you do this, I will pay you 20,000 dinars every year. This has another implication for us to learn from. It means, from this report, what we can understand is that despite the secretive and underground nature of the Shias, somehow this person, Imam's brother, ended up with this large amount of money that he's so confident that he can pay every year 20,000 dinars. 20,000 dinars at that time was a huge amount. It was like a fortune. No one understood how this much money was coming into the Shias. How much of these hukuk and these homes and everything was being collected. How come we can't keep a tab on it? How come we can't catch the people? How come we can't infiltrate? How come we can't stop these hukuk funds and these homes and everything from coming? How is it being collected? How is it being sent? How is it being circulated? They couldn't understand, but this was all the genius of the Imam. So this person, this brother of Imam Hassan al-Askari, his name was Ja'far. He's known in history as Ja'far Kadhab, Ja'far the liar. He felt that, he could be appointed to that position. Even he totally misunderstood and disregarded the position of Imamat. This was his stupidity and this was his silliness. The Caliph's advisor, Abdullah ibn Khakan, he was more wise than him. Honestly, look at his answer. He says to Ja'far Kadhab, he says, your brother, the 11th Imam, was under strict surveillance. Still, the Shias were coming to him from everywhere. They were giving him their khums. The khums was being distributed. And the Caliph was looking so intensely for just one piece of evidence that this was happening, so that he could capture and imprison people, but he could not even find that one piece of evidence. If you have the same respect amongst the Shia community, what appointment of mine do you need? You don't need me to appoint you. So the Imam somehow had orchestrated through his genius and through his immense trust in Allah and faith and his power of Imamat, this wonderful network of Shias. Then this same Ja'far was banned from the court, but he didn't stop there. Once he was banned from the court, he knew that the ruler wasn't going to listen to him. So then he started to show himself outside the court as the heir to Imam Hassan al-Askari, and not our 12th Imam, Ajallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif, who was 5 years old at that time. He started to show himself as the heir. He started to ridicule the idea that somehow the 11th Imam has a son. He's only 5. How can he lead you? I'm your true leader. Anyway, he had so the Imam, what we understand from this story of Ja'far Kadhab, we understand that the Imam was under heavy surveillance. He was undergoing intermittent imprisonments. Again and again, he would be imprisoned, he would be let free. Imprisoned, let free. Again and again. Why? To disrupt that contact and that network, and somehow they tried to break that network. But still he managed to keep the systems flowing, and the Shias were able to benefit from him. Imam was kept under a lot of surveillance, our 11th Imam. He had to appear in the royal court every Monday and every Thursday. Now the spin of the time, the way it was spun, was that, we want to honor him, because obviously the people loved Imam. So the rulers had to play this game. They said, no, we want to honor this man. Let him come before us. We will honor him. We will treat him with dignity. We will honor him. We will respect him. But really, it was just to place him into difficulty. It was to make his life difficult. It was not to allow him to rest properly and organize things and orchestrate things. To travel from the Askar to the court every Monday, every Thursday, was a long distance. It would take the whole day. Now, Imam does what? Imam uses this commuting as the method of communication between him and his followers. His followers would sit in certain places, strategic places. They would wait for him to pass by. They would exchange very quick and secretive messages, sometimes coded messages, sometimes secret messages, sometimes whispers, because they knew the surveillance was always on the Imam. But it was also very dangerous, because at times we read in history that the Imam would say, on such and such day when you see me walking, no one should say salam to me, no one should point at me, no one should look at me, don't approach me, because maybe that day there were extra surveillance, maybe that day they were looking for more evidence. So, we think we are living in tough times? Imagine that time and how the Imam kept things alive, how the community flourished, how all of the wajibat and all the hukuk and everything was being distributed and being made use of. Imam was very well respected. He was a man of virtue. He was a man of excellence. Now at that time, what tended to happen was the people who had large houses, they organized their house in such a way that a part of the house would serve as a prison. So they would say, look, I've made my house into a prison, or I've made a part of the house into a prison. O authorities of the time, if you want me to hold people for you in my prison, I will do this for you. And of course, they would be paid for it. Imam was imprisoned under a person on one occasion. This person had deep animosity for Ali Muhammad alayhi salam. But very strangely, his behavior with Imam al-Askari was different. Eventually he came to honor and respect Imam. Bani Abbas used to tell him that we want you to be as harsh as possible with this man, with this so-called Imam Hassan al-Askari. We want you to be harsh. We want you to treat him badly. Do whatever you want, whatever you can, make his life a living hell. But after only a couple of weeks of Imam being under his imprisonment, all of a sudden he feels a deep respect for Imam, to the extent that he says, I cannot even look into his eyes. And then eventually Imam was actually separated from this jailer, because he was actually converted by the Imam. Through what? Through the behavior of the Imam, the worship, the akhlaq, the kindness, the mercy, the compassion, the God-fearing, the virtues, the attitude of the Imam converted him. And again, we see this in history as well with Imam Musa al-Kadhim alayhi salam, that so many jailers were unable to be harsh to him because they said, what do we do with this man? All night he stands in worship, all day he fasts. What do you want us to do with such a godly person? Now, what messages did Imam used to give to the mu'mineen? The mu'mineen, like, as I said, would use that commuting of the Imam, the going and coming, the walking around. They would use that to their advantage. They would pass messages and they would receive messages from the Imam. On one occasion, when Imam was released from prison, he wrote something on a piece of paper and passed it to one of these mu'mineen. When the person received the paper and he was in a safe place, he opened it and he read it. What did it say? It was a verse of the Holy Quran. يُرِيدُونَ أَن يُطْفِئُوا نُورَ اللَّهِ بِأَفْوَاهِهِمْ. They desire to put out the light of Allah with their mouths. وَيَأَبَ اللَّهُ إِلَّا أَن يُتِمَّ نُورَهُ. But Allah is intent on perfecting His light. وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْكَافِرُونَ. Though the faithless should be averse to this. In other words, don't worry. I've got you. This mazhab is not going to die. This mazhab is going to flourish. This mazhab will reach its peak. Nothing can put out the light of Allah. The 12th Imam is coming. We are putting in things. Don't worry. So he makes these kinds of messages. He gives courage and strength to his Shias. And this is where I want to bring in one of his famous ahadith. This is a wonderful hadith. And this is a section of the hadith which is very often quoted by the ulama, because it's almost like a prediction for times to come. Imam says that when you are faced with difficulties, when you are faced with things that you don't know what to do, when things become tough, when you have questions which can't be answered, okay, then you need to turn to those people from our mazhab who are scholars and they are scholarly. And then he gives the qualities of such a scholar and he names them. See, many times our youth, sometimes they get confused. They say, yeah, but he's a scholar and he's also a scholar and he's saying one thing and he's saying another thing. No, I would ask you, is he really a scholar? The one that you're referring to or that you're confused by, please check. Please check, is he really a scholar? Or is he just a conjecturing, muddled, befuddled, confused person himself? Has he really attained any scholarly qualifications? Would you really say that he's a scholar? Would you really say that he's put the time and effort into these things as it should be? Can he really match the research and the standard of of scholarship of our scholars. So Imam says the following. Which scholars? These scholars. Listen. فَأَمَّا مَنْ كَانَ مِنَ الْفُقَهَا. As for those people from the fuqaha, from the scholars, who are the following. صَائِنًا لِنَفْسِهِ. They're very careful. They're very protective of their souls. They don't take these things lightly. They have a high level of taqwa. They're very careful. They're very good in their conduct. They perform all of the Islamic obligations at least. And then on top all of those mustahabbat. Sa'inan li nafsihi, hafizan li dinihi. He doesn't take his religion lightly. He's very protective over his religion. He really wants to be a religious person. He really wants to make sure his soul is attached to true religion. Mukhalifan li hawahu. He opposes his desires all the time. When his desires push him towards something worldly and materialistic, he stops. He says, no, I will not go for that. That is my lusts, that is my desires, that is a materialistic thing, that is a worldly thing. They're very careful on these things. They're mukhalif. They oppose them. Not only are they careful, they oppose them. They say, no way. You can never get me to do that thing. Mukhalifan li hawahu. Muti'an li amri mawlahu. He is someone who is completely obedient to the orders of his Lord. Allah says this, fine. Allah says don't do this, I won't do it. Allah says do this, I will do it. He has submission and he has surrender to the will and order of Allah. فَلِلْ عَوَامْ أَن يُقَلِّدُوهُ. Imam says, when you find our scholars with these qualities, فَلِلْ عَوَامْ, then it is on our public, the non-scholars, the everyday people like me and you. What should they do? أَن يُقَلِّدُوهُ. They should follow them very closely. They should do taqleed. They should do following of them. They should humble themselves before them. They should take their advice. They should take their rulings. They should take their research. Now, where do we find such people? Who is sa'ina li nafsihi, hafizan li dinihi, mukhalifan li hawa'u, muti'an li amri mawlahu. Where do we find these people? Are these people the ones who are very sensational in their claims and in their addresses and in their speeches? Are these the ones that, with poor research and poor scholarship, they claim things and they make big claims, putting 80% of our religion under question? I don't agree with 80% of our religion. I don't agree with this. I don't think 12th Imam exists. I think Prophet is a normal human being. Blah blah blah. Do they fit this criteria? Are they sa'inan li nafsihi? Are they protective over themselves? Are they hafizan li dinihi? Are they trying to protect their religion? Are they mukhalif li hawahu? Are they fighting against their carnal desires? Are they muti'an li amri mawlahu? Are they really obeying Allah properly? This is what we have to ask. Or are they just sensationalists? Are they materialistic? Do they go after the biggest paycheck? If you pay them well, they will speak. If you don't pay them, they won't speak. They'll demand A, B, C, D. If you give me these things, I will come. If you don't give me these things, I won't come. Let's assess. Let's be a bit smarter, wiser about these things. So the question remains, where are these people? If you're saying that, we want these kinds of people that you've just described from Imam Hasan al-Askari, well, where are they? Here we have to be a little bit humble and we have to look at some of the great scholars of the past, how they were, and the present as well. But usually, why I said the past? Because you usually hear things about scholars after they've died. These wonderful, amazing stories, usually we hear them after the scholar has died. Why? Because during the time of their life, these things obviously leak out. These things are known, these things are happening, people see them, people understand. However, the scholar himself will say, do not repeat this whilst I'm alive. Because I don't want that this thing becomes famous about me and then people start to idolize me, start to follow me for the wrong reason, and then maybe some riyah will creep in, maybe some pride will affect me, maybe my humility will be damaged. This is what they are like. I've seen this myself. I'm very humble to say that I was able to spend time with such scholars, alhamdulillah, and I wish one day inshallah again I'll spend time with such scholars. A couple of things I will narrate to you from some of our great scholars of the past. For example, let's look at the life of Ayatollah Ha'iri. Is one of the great quite recent scholars. He is regarded as the muassis, the founder of Hawza Ilmiya Qum. Actually, he's not the muassis. There was a Hawza before he came, but he is really credited with taking the Hawza of Qum to the next level. He really is credited with making it extremely very well organized and structured, and lots of reforms he made. Now, this person, we said what? Mukhalifan li hawahu. That Imam Hasan al-Askari says that these people are, they fight against their carnal desires. He was a unique individual. He had no desire for leadership or to run the Hawza, but the people pressured him and showed him so much love and affection, and they showed him that there was so much need, that then he eventually agreed, and he said, look, looking at your state and your potential, he agreed to help them out. Now he recalls that one of his most outstanding qualities is recalled about him was his asceticism and simple lifestyle. Remember, mukhalifan li hawahu, sa'inan li nafsihi, training the soul, fighting against lustful desires. One of the things about him that they say is that he lived, despite his power, position, devotion, fame, despite all of this, he lived a very, very simple life of a common student of the Hawza. And trust me, those lifestyles are very simple. Not only him, even on his family he would impress the same. They say that once someone gave his son an expensive abba, a robe, as a gift. It's not haram to receive gifts. People give gifts. When Ayatollah Ha'iri came to know about this, he says, my son, this abba is too much for you. This is not what we are. This is too much. Our lifestyle shouldn't be like this. We need to live simplistically. We need to live in a different way. So he says, look, what you do, take this abba. It's a very nice abba. It'll be, worth a lot of money. Take it, sell it. With that money that you get from selling it, buy 3 abbas. Buy 3. Simpler, less expensive, buy 3 abbas. And then keep 1 for you and gift 2 to your fellow students. And the son agreed. And he did this. And this was the kind of lifestyle Ayatollah Ha'iri led for him and his family. Another great marja recently, meaning, over the last century or so, that we've seen come and gone, may Allah bless his soul, is Ayatollah Burujardi. Ayatollah Burujardi was a fantastic scholar. You'll see when you go to Qum, there is a certain area, so you know where the graves of the ulama are. Just outside those main collection of graves, outside that area, there's another separate grave which is lit by a green light. It's often, when I go to Qum, I use that as my meeting point. I tell people we'll meet at the grave of Ayatollah Burujardi. It's unmissable. You go there, his photo is there, there is his shajara, his lineage is there, and there's a little bit of information about him, and people pray Fatiha there a lot. So, Ayatollah Burujardi, he is the next stage of development of the Hawza. So if Ayatollah Ha'iri founded the Hawza in the way I explained, Ayatollah Burujardi now elevated the Hawza. Now he took the administration to the next level, and he established lots of things, lots of projects, lots of international efforts. In fact, what they say is, had it not been for the efforts of Ayatollah Burujardi, who established something called Dar al-Taqrib in Egypt, meaning the foundation which brings people together. He founded this in Egypt. Why? One of the effects of that Dar al-Taqrib in Egypt was that it influenced and helped to influence Sheikh Muhammad Shaltut of Al-Azhar from the Ahl Sunnah to declare the Ja'fari Mazhab as the 5th legitimate madhab of Islam. on top of the Shafi'i, Hanafi, Hanbali, Maliki schools, Al-Azhar has declared officially in a document, you can search it if you want, that the Ja'fari Shia mazhab of fiqh is also legitimate. So he established these things. Now, he was a wonderful, brilliant personality, and he had a strong level of taqwa and a strong level of devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and very strong in his akhlaq. There's too much to say about him. Time has run out, but I will just mention one or two things. On one occasion, what he did was, in his Dars-e-Kharij, there was a student in the crowd. Now, Ayatollah Burujardi, he's human, he's not ma'soom, okay? So obviously, we don't expect ismat from these people. So what happened on one occasion is that there was a student in the crowd. You know, Bahth-e-Kharij is often like challenging the speaker. The Ayatollah will explain his methodology of a particular ruling, and he can be challenged from the floor, and it happens. So one particular person in the crowd was challenging Agha again and again, again and again, again and again. Now Agha was getting a little bit frustrated, okay? And on one of these challenges, because it was happening frequently again and again, Agha says to him, "Young man, please be quiet." Right? Maybe he was disruptive, or maybe he was not using proper language, or maybe he was being disrespectful, or maybe he was taking the time of others unnecessarily. So Agha says to him, "Young man, be quiet." And he said it in a slightly harsh way. Immediately he felt, no, this was not right. I should not have done this. This was a little bit harsh. What did he do? He descended from the pulpit. They used the mimbar as their place of oratory and explaining these things. He descended, he called him to him. That student went to him out of respect. He took his hand, bowed in front of all of the hundreds of students of Bahth-e-Kharij, bowed and kissed his hand and said, "Please forgive me." Imagine, the marja of the time, arguably the most powerful man in the Shia world, maybe in the whole world, humbles himself like this and kisses the hand of a relatively junior scholar or student of the Hawza. Also, he had a great attachment to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. He says, Ayatollah Nuri Hamadani narrates this. Ayatollah Nuri Hamadani narrates that once he was in the presence of Ayatollah Burujardi. They were talking about different things, and the discussion somehow went on to eyesight. Okay? Now at that moment, Ayatollah Burujardi was actually in his late years, yeah? He was nearly 90 years old. Yet, he never used glasses, neither for long distance viewing, nor short distance viewing, or even for studying, and he would read profusely, and the lighting in those days was not good, but still his eyes were fine. Ayatollah Nuri Hamadani says that someone asked him, that, "How come your eyesight is still good?" He narrates, he says, "When I was in Burujard," where he's from, Burujardi, he's from Burujard. He says, "When I was in Burujard in my younger years, due to a lot of reading, my eyes felt very weak, and they began to hurt." Now in Burujard, on the day of Ashura, people used to commemorate the day of Ashura in a very particular manner. What did they do? He says that throughout the city, a special kind of mixture of clay is made. And on the day of Ashura, people go there, they take that clay which people make, and they put it on themselves. They put it on their face, on their head, on their clothes. You will have seen this in Karbala and these places, that people do this. It's one of the cultures, and in fact it's one of the things mentioned in the books as well, that on the day of Ashura you should be disheveled and in a state of grief. So they would do this. People put this on themselves from head to toe sometimes, and they go forth for Azadari in groups. On one such Ashura, I was in the crowd, and with the niyat of shifa, I said to Allah, "Oh Allah, cure me." I took some of that clay from one of the mourners. So not just the clay from the main bit. Someone had actually put it on themselves. He said, "I took it from that person and I wiped it on my eyes. My eyes became better, and since that day I have never suffered with any pain in the eyes. However, he mentions one thing. He says, now I've told you this story. Wali ta zamani ke zinde hastam razi nistam in mawzu bazgu shavad. Like I said in the beginning, he says, I've told you this, but whilst I'm alive, I'm not happy that you tell anyone this story. This is our ulama. You need a degree of self-discipline, training, nurturing, ilm, amal, knowledge, action, taqwa. All of these things are necessary. So brothers, sisters, mu'mineen, mu'minat, zamana is bad, the time is bad, the challenges are bad. People around us, on YouTube and every other platform that they use, these things are not good. They are leading people astray. But my humble suggestion is two things. Number one, taqwa. If we have taqwa, we become fireproof. When we are fireproof, it doesn't matter. They come and go, they speak, they don't speak. No one will affect us because we have built that amount of resistance in ourselves that we don't get influenced by this. Number one. Number two, when we are looking for guidance and we are looking for answers, because it's a human thing, we will ask questions, we will have issues, we will want to find out more about things. When those times come, think very carefully who you go to for your answers. Think very carefully. Let us go to those people who qualify as guides and those who should be followed. Not every Tom, Dick and Harry can be followed. Not any old person who just says, I've got a degree here and I have a degree there, or I'm a director of an institute here or there. They don't necessarily qualify. So let's be very, very careful. وَإِن تُطِعْ أَكْثَرَ مَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ يُضِلُّكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Remember the words of the Quran. If you follow most of the people on this earth, they will misguide you from the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sallallahu alayka ya Aba Muhammad, ya Hasan al-Askari. Oh Allah, bless our Imams. They have done so much for us. They have guided us. They have given their lives for us. They have died for us. Oh Allah, we remember that when this great man, this great individual, our beloved Imam, when he was killed with the poison, at the time of his janazah and Salatul Mayyit, his brother Ja'far, who we mentioned in this lecture, came forward and said, I will lead the prayers, because an Imam's prayer can only be led by another Imam. Then they say, a small boy, Sallallahu alayka ya sahib al-zaman, a small boy came forth who no one had seen before. He held his uncle's clothing, that Ja'far. He held his uncle's clothing and said, my uncle, you may not lead the prayers. Only an Imam can lead another Imam's funeral prayers. Ya Imam Hasan al-Askari, your son was able to lead your prayers even at the age of 5, even though he was in hiding. We remember Karbala. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam was not even able to lead the prayers of Aba Abdullah. He was not even able to sit at the side of his father. He was not even able to be there at the last moments of Imam Hussein. In fact, he was not able to even bury his father until 2 days after Ashura. But what body did he bury? Under the sun, under the hot sun of Karbala, stripped of all its clothes, mutilated and trampled body of Aba Abdullah. This is the body that Imam Sajjad buries. O Sahib al-Zaman, we give you condolences on this shahadat of your father. O Sahib al-Zaman, may Allah hasten your reappearance and make us ready for you to be in your group and to be in your army. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
करबला ताज़ा हुई, करबला ताज़ा हुई, करबला ताज़ा हुई, करबला ताज़ा हुई। रोते हैं पैगंबर, करबला ताज़ा हुई। रोते हैं पैगंबर, करबला ताजा हुई। है अस्करी के लाशे पर, है अस्करी के लाशे पर ज़हरा है रो रही। रोते हैं पैगंबर करबला ताजा हुई। रोते हैं पैगंबर करबला ताजा हुई। हर सिमत जालिमों की है पहरे लगे हुए। कर कैद अस्करी को वो महदी है ढूंढते। पर्दे में रोए कायम, पर्दे में रोए कायम, जिंदा में अस्करी। रोते हैं पैगंबर करबला ताजा हुई। रोते हैं पैगंबर करबला ताजा हुई। देखे जहर लहीने बपा जश्न है किया। रोती है हौज़े कौसर प्यासा इमाम था। सादात इस जहां से, सादात इस जहां से प्यासी चली गई। रोते हैं पैगंबर करबला ताजा हुई। रोते हैं पैगंबर करबला ताजा हुई। है अस्करी के लाशे फौजें खड़ी रही। मैयत बाप की तो आएगा आखिरी। बेटी कोई भी बाबा को, बेटी कोई भी बाबा को पुरसा ना दे सकी। होते हैं पैगंबर करबला ताजा हुई। रोते हैं पैगंबर करबला ताजा हुई। वारिस हुआ हमारा है जैसे बेआसरा। नबियों ने अर्श पे है मातम बपा किया। रो के दुआ है करते, रो के दुआ है करते ईसा ज़हूर की। रोते हैं पैगंबर करबला ताजा हुई। रोते हैं पैगंबर करबला ताजा हुई। ऐशे के अज़ादार करो रोज ये दुआ। मौला ज़हूर कर दे सदका हुसैन का। सदियों से फातिमा है, सदियों से फातिमा है इंसाफ मांगती। रोते हैं पैगंबर करबला ताजा हुई। रोते हैं पैगंबर करबला ताजा हुई। है अस्करी के लाशे पर, है अस्करी के लाशे पर ज़हरा है रो रही। रोते हैं पैगंबर करबला ताजा हुई। रोते हैं पैगंबर करबला ताजा हुई। देखे जहर नहीं ने बपा जश्न है किया। रोती है हौज़े कौसर प्यासा इमाम था। सादात इस जहां से, सादात इस जहां से प्यासी चली गई। रोते हैं पैगंबर करबला ताजा हुई, रोते हैं पैगंबर करबला ताजा हुई। है अस्करी के लाशे पर, है अस्करी के लाशे पर ज़हरा है रो रही।
Allahumma kull veliyye al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan salawatuka alayhi wa ala abaihi fi hadhihi as-sa'a wa fi kulli وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرزك توعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله، السلام عليك يا وارث نوح نبي الله، السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله، السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله، السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله، السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله، السلام عليك يا وارث أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام ولي الله، السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى، السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى، السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء، السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى، السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور، أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين، فلعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأصلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة، لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مدلهمات ثيابها، وأشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين، وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرزي الزكي الهادي المهدي، وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا، وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسلا أني بكم مؤمن وبيا بكم موقن بشرائع ديني وخواتيم عملي وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع، صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد، السلام عليك أيها الشهيد، السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة سمعت بضوءك فرزيت به. السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباءه، السلام عليكم يا أصفياء الله وفداءه، السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله، السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الولي الناصح، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله بأبي أنتم وأمي تبتم، وطابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم، وفزتم فوزا عظيما، فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوصيين، السلام عليك يا ابن أول القوم إسلاما وأقدمهم إيمانا وأقومهم بدين الله وحوتهم على الإسلام. أشهد لقد نصحت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك فنعم الأخ المواسي. فلعن الله أمة قتلت، ولعن الله أمة ظلمت، ولعن الله أمة استحلت منك المحارم وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام. فنعم الصابر المجاهد المحامي الناصر والأخ الدافع عن أخي المجيب إلى طاعة ربه الراغب فيما زهد فيه غيره من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل. والحقك الله بدرجة آبائك في جنات النعيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا غريب الغرباء السلطان أبا الحسن علي بن موسى الرضا، كن شفيعنا وشفيع والدينا في يوم الجزاء. السلام عليك يا أختك فاطمة المعصومة وعلى أخيك القاسم ورحمة الله وبركاته. صلى الله عليك يا ابن الزهراء يا مولاي يا ابن الحسن يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. أجر الله فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مقرضك وظهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. الفاتحة. شفاء كل مريض.
حياتنا يا حسين، مماتنا يا حسين، عزاؤنا يا حسين. لم نكن نبكي على طفل رضيع، بل طفولات مدى الدنيا.
عجايب يا رسول الله وغرايب يا ابو العترة، حسن قبره بحماك شلون ترضى ينهدم قبره، هل ترضى ينهدم قبره؟ مسموم راح مظلوم راح الحسن، مظلوم صيح مسموم مسموم مظلوم بحياتك يا رسول الله، سند للكون وجدانك، ومن أشر عليك الموت بيدودي فانجث معنك، ضريحك صار لي المطرود، هلا مفزع والكرم شانك، يا القبرك يزيل الهم والوافد إليك يسلم، غوالي بدهره ما يشتم، إذا يقصد إليك معلول يشم من تربيتك يبرى مسموم راحل مظلوم صيح مظلوم مسموم مسموم وجودك رحمة الباري، ضريحك مفزع المختار، أبد لا والله ما ترضى ولا تقبلها يا المختار، حبيبك ينهدم قبره يا الله، حبيبك ينهدم يطول معويلي الأشرار، حياة هضام ويتعذب، صليل السم قامر يلهب، بمماته كابدي الأصعاب، حياته وموتته مصابين، وجنابك سيدي أدرى مسموم صيح راح الحسن مظلوم مظلوم هلا هلا مسموم حاضر حاضر مظلوم مظلوم. إلى الشاعر الأديب الأستاذ جابر الكاظمي، حسن سبطك يا ابو ابراهيم تجرع بالحياة هموم، عام صعب وشد منها يوم يمر اشد من يوم، عقب القهر لنشب لك على فراش الاجل مسموم، هذا الحسن يا جد قضى ومات بغدر جعده، قضى ومات بغدر جعده، لهيب السم وطار كبده، خسف بدري سيم الحالة عليه ينكس فتي الحرة مسموم مظلوم مظلوم هلا 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 بالنشامة مسموم مسموم حاضر حاضر ايه مظلوم ايه الحسن سبطك يا ابو ابراهيم تجرع بالحياة هموم عام صعب وشد من عام يوم يمر أشد من يوم العقب القهر لنشبلك على فراشي أجل مسموم هذا الحسن يا جده قضى ومات بغدر جعده لهيب السم وطار كبده خسف بدري سيم الحالة عليه ينكس فات الحرة مسموم مظلوم مظلوم قواك الله هلا هلا مسموم مسموم مظلوم مظلوم الحسن نحب القيضة وثاني مصيبة ساعة الشيعة هلا يا مقبري يا ابو ابراهيم لما رادوا يدفنوه لواصف ما يعاونه نبيل صار ناعش يرموه بدأت ترمي حدوانه سهامي ومزقته جفانه لو ان ما صبر خوانه كان الدم يصير مواد ودينك ينتهي امره مسموم على مظلوم مسموم